And welcome to Transfermarkt TV. I'm Ben Littlemore, and with me is Stefan Biankowski and Ewan Robertson. Now, Stefan, you've written a great piece on Manchester City and whether there's been a slight decline this season under Pep Guardiola from the treble winners last season. Can you just tell us a bit more about what you've researched?
Yeah, so off the back of that 1-1 draw with Chelsea at the weekend, a really dramatic game actually, a match in which Chelsea really hit Man City on the break time after time after time, and in particular in the second half, Pep Guardiola's team tried to break them down, and it was 2 points dropped, which obviously is huge in this kind of title race at the minute, which they have with Arsenal and Liverpool, but I think it actually went a long way to kind of explaining some of the issues in this Man City team this season, and maybe points to a team that may be gone backwards ever so slightly in the league this year, which will obviously be music to the ears of Liverpool and Arsenal fans around the world. But, to keep it rather straightforward, they have problems in defence and they have problems in attack. So if we kind of take a look at the defensive issues, first and foremost, the thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at the stats was that Saturday's game, or 1-1 draw with Chelsea, was actually I've got the stat right here. It was the 11th time in the Premier League this season that they've actually conceded first against an opponent, which means in 46% of the Premier League games this season, they've gone behind first, which is a huge stat on its own, but it's also huge when we consider that last season that number was 24%, and the season before that it was 21%. So more or less, Man City are conceding goals first twice as often as they did last year. When we then look at the goals that they're conceding per game, that number has drifted up to 1.04, where it was 0.84 last season, and it was 0.68 the season before that. So again, we're seeing not huge numbers in the grand scheme of things. Of course, like 1 goal conceded per game is still a fantastic record for any team, but compared to 2 seasons ago, we're almost creeping up to them conceding on almost twice as often as they did in the 21-22 season. So, I think Guardiola has a lot of issues there he has to deal with. We saw against Chelsea that, Chelsea set up really well to really hit City on the break, and because City play with that really high line, they were exposed time after time after time, whether it was Jackson, Gallagher, Cole Palmer, or Raheem Sterling, who obviously got the goal. We've actually seen quite a lot of teams do that as well this season. So that's a really interesting thing that Guardiola's kind of wrestling with. If we then go to the other end of the pitch, there's an even more fascinating conundrum that they have because, they've got arguably the best striker in the world in Erling Haaland. And even though he has, quite frankly, been scoring goals for fun in the Premier League and making it look extremely easy, the way that Man City have shoehorned him into their team, the way that Guardiola has had to kind of change his tactics to accommodate a big number 9, which, if we go back 2 or 3 years ago, just wasn't a part of the kind of Man City tactics book. It's had some interesting kind of consequences on the team. Now, of course, Haaland scored goals for fun. We saw that last season where he got 36 goals or 39 goals in 36 games, I think it was, in the Premier League, something crazy like that. He finished the year having scored 38% of the team's goals, which is just absolutely mental, really. If we go back to the season before that, the highest proportion was Kevin De Bruyne with 15%. So, he's making up 3 times as much as the most dominant player the year before. But the problem with that is that if you then build a team around one key striker and you score lots of goals and you win the league and everyone's happy, if that player then either drops out of form or gets injured, then the whole kind of system kind of grinds to a halt, which is kind of what we've seen this season. He was picked up an injury in December. He was out for 5 games. He's been back for, I think, 5 or 6 games now, maybe 4. He's only got 2 goals, which, again, absolutely fine. But it meant that Man City, without him or without him at full fitness, haven't quite looked the same. And the numbers suggest as well that they've scored on average 2.33 goals per Premier League game this season. Again, on its own, very impressive. But compared to last season's 2.42 or the season before's 2.53, it suggests an actual 10% drop in goals scored. Now, these are all small margins, but if you add 10% drop in goals scored to a almost 50% rise in goals conceded, it means that the margins for victory get much smaller. And just one final stat I'll leave with you, which I think is quite interesting, is that last season Man City eventually overtook Arsenal in the Premier League title race and won the league. They finished the season scoring 10 or conceding 10 fewer goals than Arsenal. So the perceived wisdom was, Man City really tied things there at the back. They ground out results. They won the title. This season, they've actually conceded 4 more goals than Arsenal already at this point in the season, which shows the huge swing, not just in Man City, but also in how well Arsenal are playing. But, whichever way you want to look at it, it's suggesting that up front and in defence, Man City aren't quite where they were last season or the season before.
Some really interesting stats there, Stefan. Just to throw it to you, Ewan, obviously Man City have the opportunity this season to do an unprecedented achievement and win the English top flight for 4 seasons in a row. It's never been done in the history of English football. How much of a motivation do you think that will be for Guardiola, who's got to keep motivating his players every year for this relentless trophy winning? And how disappointed will he be if they don't pull it off, considering he probably will never have another opportunity to achieve that?
Yeah, I think it'll be a big motivation. There's been so much talk in recent years about, is this Manchester City side the best ever in the Premier League era? If they go on to win 4 titles, and it's difficult to argue against that. I think Guardiola's just a ruthless winner. He'll want to win every trophy that he's in this season. I still think they'll pick up at least 1 trophy this season, and most people would probably say they're still favourites in the league. This is usually a time of season where City really kick on and go on this run where they're almost invincible, beat everyone before them. But there is, as Stefan mentioned, been clinks in their armour this season. And the other teams, it's probably a 2-horse race this year. There's 3 teams in there, so there's less margin for error for City. The difference that they have maybe over Arsenal and Liverpool is they've been there, they've done it, they know what to do when the pressure gets ramped up. So, they're definitely still very much in the mix, but they've not really, even the performance levels haven't reached the heights of previous seasons. You heard after the game on the weekend when they dropped point, I think Guardiola and Rodri both came out with comments which I didn't really agree with in terms of refereeing decisions and the way Chelsea played. So, but you still make them strong favourites to go on and become Premier League title winners again.
And just quickly back to you, Stefan. We've seen this season that Jurgen Klopp is going to stand down at the end of the season. He says he hasn't got the energy to keep going again at the top level. Do you think this is something that could be in the pipeline in the near future for Pep Guardiola? If he was to win that 4th title this season, 4th in a row with Man City, do you think he could consider stepping down in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's a huge possibility, especially if he was to do, a Premier League and Champions League double. We all thought he was holding on to win that Champions League with Man City. We know how much that trophy meant for the club, but you think personally to win the 4th consecutive league title and back-to-back Champions League trophies would be an incredible legacy. And you do kind of wonder when he will decide to call it quits, because, as you said, much like Jurgen Klopp, he kind of lives for every moment. The absolute theatrics of him when Chelsea scored on Saturday was, fitting of an opera stage, to be perfectly honest with you, especially with those slow motion cameras that they have these days. So, you could totally imagine that burnout might be an issue for him as well. The only thing that makes me kind of question if and when he leaves is, where does he go next? Guardiola's always been very kind of careful with which clubs he picks. He picks clubs that are very dominant in their leagues, clubs that have plenty of money for him to spend, clubs that know how to attract top players. And can't really see him going back to Spain, can't really see him going back to Germany, can't really see him going to Italy, although, you never say never. And, I can't imagine something like PSG would hugely intrigue him. So whether he's just holding on to Man City because he has simply nothing else to achieve in the league, unless, I guess, maybe international football. But yeah, you'd imagine if he was to kind of turn things around and win the Champions League and Premier League double this season, then that would be a great kind of bookmark to his, his career at Man City.
Absolutely. Right, well, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out Ewan's excellent article on the Transfermarkt website, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks very much, guys.